Hello, my name is Todd Czubek. First, I have to say that it is an honor to speak with you here today. It's always important to make sure that what happens at Boston University, where I'm a faculty member, and what happens in the community are linked. Our goals are to figure out how what happens in college within our university and the processes that take place there meet the needs of deaf children and hard of hearing children, as well as their families. My job at Boston University is basically to train graduate students to become teachers for deaf children. So that means we do a lot of work thinking about instructional strategies, thinking about how we can promote deaf and hard of hearing children to become successful. We talk about what best practices are and what roles are for American Sign Language, as well as English, and how both of them can become part of the answer for academic success, personal success, and long-term effectiveness as a citizen. So that is really our job. And it's a hard and valuable job, as I'm sure all of you know. It's hard to find something more important than preparing children, right, who are going to be the future of this country. And that work for us is hard. But one of the things we see again and again and again is that the work can't happen inside a vacuum. We can't do it all by ourselves, teachers or teacher preparation experts. We need partnerships with parents and families and children. Over and over, we see that our job and its success depends on you as parents, depends on the families. If families are removed from the equation, our success is consistently diminished. And so I want to talk about the fact that if we understand that that is true, what do we do with that information? Right? It's easy to say parents are important, families are necessary. I think that's something we've known for a long time, right? It takes a village. But okay, suppose we accept the idea that it does take a village. In practice, what does that mean? Today's talk is going to address that idea as it relates to children's success, as it relates to school success. So I hope the rest of this presentation is something that you enjoy. It probably makes sense to talk about some things that we assume as parents and as families. We know that you provide nurturing, we know that you provide support, and we know that you provide love, right? Those things are hard for us to quantify. As an idea, they're profound, right? They're too valuable. There's no number. There's no statistic. There's no formula that helps us understand the value of those three things. And we assume that they're there. But they're huge. They create the foundation for everything. When kids arrive at school, if they have nurturing and support and love, our job as teachers and teacher trainers becomes much more effective. Everything we do rests on that foundation that you create. So everything that we build is built on your foundation. So you become like the superheroes, right? You create something magical. You create something special, something actually extraordinary. And so that idea for us is important to understand. But it's important to understand as well, regardless of the fact that you all, as parents, are superheroes, superheroes still function as a team, right? The Avengers are a team. The Justice League is a team. And working together, that work together is essential for success. Theirs and yours. So we have to figure out how we create better connections, better teamwork between schools and families. And so in our preparation, we have to figure out how we let families challenge the classrooms that our teachers teach in, how we let families become empowered to have serious inquiry about why and what for and the rationale behind approaches that are or are not working in the classroom. We want you to be able to think about long-term realistic goals and have those long-term realistic goals addressed. Often parents feel stuck, right? So if parents come into a meeting, some of you may be parents, the schools are considered the experts, and so parents tend to be docile and go along with the flow. But that relationship misses the point of working together. It misses the power that parents really have and the power that they must have, as well as the contributions that they must make. Again, that's easy to say, right? But how do we know that? I think it's important that we review, a special project that demonstrates the role of parent involvement and why parent involvement is so critical, so essential for progress. I was fortunate enough to be involved in a large reform project at the school I used to teach at. I used to be a classroom teacher for 15 years in elementary school at both the New Mexico School for the Deaf and in Northeast Pennsylvania at the Scranton State School for the Deaf. That school has since closed and been taken over by the Western Pennsylvania School for the Deaf. But regardless, in my work in New Mexico and then after moving to Scranton, Pennsylvania, while at Scranton, the timing and the universe lined up such that the school was able to get support via a Title I grant. We received funding to improve school performance. Like many schools for the deaf, outcomes were not great. And so it took a lot of work in terms of figuring out how we would go about this reform project. We needed to have outcomes for deaf children that were measurable. And so we contracted at that time with a group from Boston University, where I teach now. So a group of BU faculty and researchers and professors hooked up with the Scranton State School for the Deaf. And that collaboration was really designed to rethink how we go about approaches to literacy, including the important role for American Sign Language as well as English in understanding literacy. And we talked a lot about why a bilingual approach, an American Sign Language English approach, made sense. Now, understand, this was taking place in the context of northeastern Pennsylvania, a very blue-collar region, an area that did not have a high percentage of families with deaf children of deaf parents. So in that environment, where the school had historically not been performing well, that place became the perfect opportunity for us to say, if we can make this school, that looks like many schools for the deaf all over the country and all over the world, if we can make something happen here, then perhaps this formula that we're applying, this approach, can be generalizable to more places than just the Scranton State School for the Deaf. So it meant that part of our intention was to make sure that we were accountable. We had to make sure that we had measures about what was happening before we started, in addition to as we initiated this reform project. So the accountability that we had to undertake was important. It's easy for us to say, and we could have said, oh yes, we feel the school's getting better. I sense the school's getting better. I can see the school's getting better. We needed proof. So it was very interesting in that the measure that we chose was one that was designed for hearing children, called the PIAT, or the Peabody Individual Achievement Test. In that test, there are 4 different subtests that we applied. The subtests included things like reading comprehension, math skills, general knowledge, as well as spelling. So those were the 4 basic subtests that we applied from the PIAT inventory. So what ended up happening was that when we started the project, a project that, by the way, lasted 5 years, at the end of this project, we had the really strong sense that kids were doing well. Faculty who were teaching in the program were inspired. I mean, they said to themselves, my God, we see this progress. And we didn't just talk about what we felt. We were able to prove progress via amazing results, especially in all 4 areas that I described previously. So our measures, the benchmarks used for those measures, were comparing our students, our deaf students, to the same aged hearing peers. Right? Those were the only norms we had, to compare them against. And so our kids were compared to them, that sort of expectation. And this is very interesting because what you can imagine is in the first few years, our kids were not measuring up to the average hearing student that was the same aged level. But what we did appreciate is the administration gave us time, because language development, reform, changing systems, all those things are part of a long game. They don't happen overnight. We don't see results immediately in this kind of project. So we could have been given 1 or 2 years and not seen that many results and then been deemed a failure. And we could have said, we tried our best, we had a couple of years. We were consistent that this was going to be a long game. We had faith that we wanted to make sure that the integrity of our model would not be compromised and would be maintained, knowing, all team members knowing that this is a long game. Everything that we have learned, everything we have seen about language development and growth requires a long-term commitment. And that to us was really important. So at the end of the project, we had these, again, amazing results that I'd like to share with you. First, an important part about what we talked about is related to general outcomes, the general results that we saw. If we pay attention to those 4 subtests, the 4 sub-areas that I mentioned, math, general knowledge, reading comprehension, and spelling, we can see that in 3 of those 4, general knowledge, math, and reading comprehension, we can break down which features of students, which characteristics of our subjects who were involved with that project correlated with student success, right? So if students did really well, if students did better, we wanted to be able to go back and look at what was it about those students that was different. For the purposes of this talk, we were really inspired by one specific feature because we saw those kids who did make progress, especially in terms of general knowledge, math, and reading comprehension. One of the factors that we saw that correlated strongly with success was not parental hearing status, which means whether the parents were hearing or deaf. So for us, we have known forever that if deaf children come to school with deaf parents, they typically do well, right? They arrive with a strong language foundation. They arrive with awareness about identity. Their parents can communicate with them at home, and a range of other advantages allow those kids typically to do well, to typically do better than most other deaf or hard of hearing kids. But they do well, understand, despite the system. So even if the school or the system is not so great, they are able to overcome the odds because they come to school well equipped with all the tools necessary for success. They're prepared for progress, and they're able to figure out solutions to challenges, even if the system is difficult, but they navigate it and are able to overcome it. But most other kids who don't arrive with all those advantages don't come with the right tools, they don't come with the right foundations. Those kids typically don't do as well for a range of reasons. So for our results after 5 years to show that it does not matter whether the kids were from deaf or hearing parents, for us, that meant that there was something in the system itself that worked for all kids. And that was huge, that was inspiring. And the second thing we saw was that in every case, in every situation, those kids whose parents were rated as being highly involved were the kids who went to success. Now, how we define that was parents who typically came to parent meetings, who communicated regularly with teachers, parents who showed up at our informative meetings. And our informative meetings for parents were very, very consistent and regular. So those parents who earned those high involvement ratings were the kids who also did well. So there was something about what we did, the incorporation of parents and the parents' impact on the system itself, as well as the system's impact on parents, was able to work together. It was like an Avengers-style, Justice League-style teamwork approach where we realized that there were things that both parties needed to contribute. And that for us was really inspiring. Parent involvement was critical. We see it and we saw it. But for us, what was really amazing and inspiring is something that we hope is inspiring for you. So right now, as we get into the specifics of what happened, it's important to understand the charts that I'm going to be showing you. So if you look at this chart, you will see these horizontal lines, right? The horizontal dotted line, that line represents where same-aged hearing peers should be performing, right? So their same-aged hearing peers are the benchmark against which we compared our students. So you can see as we progress across that horizontal line, if we talk about general knowledge, for example, if you start with the students who are in the first year, any student whose first year of the program is on the far left. So all those black dots on the left, that left vertical column, represent students in the first year of their experience in the program. So no matter which of the 5 years was year one for students, all students appear with their scores in this first column. Obviously, there are more dots in year one than there are in year 5 because everyone had a year 1, but only one cohort was able to have a year 5, right? So the first cohort had a second, third, and fourth, and fifth year there. But the next cohort in year 2, there's another cohort that then starts at year 1. So you can imagine different cohorts starting in year 1 allows us to have more students in the year 1 results, and only one group, because of the time limit, was able to finish the entire 5 years, and they're represented by this vertical column. So this chart represents all students as they move through the program. So if we start on the far left, what we can see is our average scores are below where hearing students should be. Now understand, this is in the very, very beginning, first grade. They're already at first grade below where hearing students should be. And it's difficult to be that far behind hearing kids at the very beginning. So for us to be starting below the very beginning point of hearing students reflects a lot of what we had to do. In year 2, we're still behind, but in year 3, you can see the average scores start to reflect the fact that half of our kids are still behind, yes. But the other half of the kids in year 3 are ahead. And so our average trajectory did show a positive growth rate over the course of years. In year 4, we can see the average again is even greater than where hearing kids are. And at the end, those kids who went through 5 years of the program, they're able then to demonstrate that every single one, almost every single one, is above where a typical hearing-aged peer, similar-aged peer is. And this is a design, again, evaluated for hearing students. And against hearing students, those students whose parents were highly involved in the program, one of the features that we saw for them that their parents were highly involved are all above where hearing students are. So that is something amazing. The same results we see for math. If we look at math, the same trajectory. The same results were also demonstrated for spelling. The same results are also demonstrated for reading comprehension. So for us, something really magical happened. Part of our work, part of what we wanted to do in this retrospective study is to say, well, wait a second, what happened? How do we understand? How do we make that happen again, right? So a replication is really important. So as we look back, number one, we set up this environment where parents themselves had to be involved, right? For us, it was a non-negotiable part of our reform project. The structure of the system was built on parent involvement. So what we did is we had monthly parent meetings designed to make it easy for parents to come. So we would provide daycare, we provided food, we provided a whole host of resources, materials, and tools that parents are able to bring home from this. So we always believed that if parents invested time in coming, they had to leave with something in order to make their jobs at home easier. So in addition to that sort of encouragement for participation, we had a guiding philosophy that sort of permeated everything we did, that talked about how or what parents want, that addressed what they needed. Maybe an easy way to understand the philosophy in terms of the idea we applied is related to this concept of nudges. Nudges are really sort of built-in default supports that guide us towards specific behavior. So often for us as people, if something is not familiar, if something isn't ready, right? If it creates doubt or if it's complicated and we don't have the background to understand these issues well, it's hard for us all to make good decisions, right? So it's easy for us to decide if you prefer chocolate or vanilla, right? So those are easy decisions. We know we go into an ice cream shop and we're like, all right, I have my preference and I'm going to order what my preference is. So you pick your favorite because you've done this, you've practiced this, you're ready, you have an orientation, and you're informed about your favorite choice. The same thing, do you prefer dogs or cats? Those kinds of choices that we make are easy because we arrive at those situations aware. We know internally what works for us, what's good for us, what supports the kinds of preferences we want, the kinds of outcomes we want in a situation. So we go into those situations, those easy situations, prepared. But in other situations, we're really not prepared. We need nudges. So for example, if you go in and start a new job and they have health plans, A, B, C, D, E, and you're left with choosing which of those health plans is the best for you, and you say to yourself, oh my goodness, how do I make this decision? What we need are nudges, right? So we meet with HR, we explain our situation, we explain how many family members we have, we explain all the different characteristics that we want to be included and about us and our priorities, and then the nudge is like, we look at a matrix and says, all right, given all the things that you told me, you want to choose option B or option C. So that's a nudge, right? So we get guidance. We're not left to our own devices to pick something. But the same thing happens and must happen in schools, especially schools serving deaf and hard of hearing kids. Parents arrive at the situation unfamiliar with all the things they need to know about instruction and instructional approaches. Parents aren't trained in deaf education. Parents don't have strategic philosophies for how to develop vocabulary, for how to, encourage reading skills, for how to make concepts accessible. All those things become roles that schools need to apply in order not to overwhelm parents. So it creates a shutdown. If anybody is overwhelmed at all the things they need to be able to negotiate, they say, all right, well, forget it. I'll just leave it to you. Just go. You just tell me. And then parents often, because of survival skill mechanisms, release. So our philosophy was, in this reform project, part of what we wanted to see in terms of parents is we wanted to create a system where we gave parents pathways, right? We wanted to make it easy via nudges for parents to say, all right, well, we know kids come into this formula with nurturing, support, and love. You build this foundation that we're going to be built on. that our foundation is going to be built on. So right now, at the next level for vocabulary development, this is what we want you to do. And so we laid out an outline for what was necessary in terms of vocabulary development at home. Tools that were easy to use so that they could encourage specific vocabulary development that was in correlation with what we work on in school. What do we do for reading development? We gave parents doable, manageable reading strategies that they could apply at home. Very simple. What about science skills? We provided real support, real accessible support for developing science skills, not just saying, oh, you should register for a sign language class. And again, I am not registering for a sign language class. Those things are wonderful. But in real life, it's not that simple. So what we wanted to do is be able to make something that was easy, something they could do at home, that the whole family would be engaged with. And by the same token, we wanted to involve extended family, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. So we came up with nudges that allowed extended family to be involved with their deaf relative. So every time parents came, we gave them a different nudge to say, let's push you down, let's urge you down this pathway. And so instead of parents saying, I don't know, and of course they don't know, how could parents know? We provided them with ways forward. So that, really for us, had an outcome of parents, one, feeling good, and parents, two, feeling consistently engaged. Right? Parents knew they were getting something. They saw a road ahead. And additionally, I think what it did is it bought us time. Remember how we talked about early in this presentation that this is a long game. So parents could rightfully say, after year one, this new approach, this new idea, I'm not seeing any results, and it's been an entire year. But we talked about how to notice progress. So sometimes progress that we see doesn't show up in standardized tests, right? Immediately. So we needed to be able to give parents a lens so that they could see that the progress kids were making was there. That had to be accessible to parents. So it requires a different orientation. So part of the foundation for long-term success was parents buying in. Parents being able to see what it was kids were doing. And then in year two, when the progress was slow but consistent, we had parent investment. We respected parents enough to get them involved, and the parents felt like they were getting something. And then in year three, when we started to see actual results on standardized tests, the shift that we had already implemented in terms of parent perspective was able then to be complemented by real standardized test results. And at that point, the buy-in was complete. We realized that we had set up a situation where the long-term investment that we had was starting to pay off because we started to see results in terms of kids' performance in school and their relationships at home. And then those parents who had been with us and who had learned all this and who had gained all this became resources for the new parents, the new cohort of parents who would come in. And so they became sort of co-team members for this project. And all the parents started relying on each other, saying, I was there. I saw this. I remember what it was like in year one. But if you stay the course, if you don't give up, if you maintain this progress, you are going to be able to see these gains. But the teamwork has to be there. So I want to thank you again for this opportunity. I hope I left and shared something with you that you might be able to take away in hopes that I think all of us can understand the critical role of partnerships. The critical role of parents being an integral part of the system is really important. Without that coordination, I think that we are risking the future of our deaf children because the future of progress and schools and academic improvement for our kids rests on that design. So if we can incorporate a model that takes advantage of all the stakeholders that can impact our kids' education, we are more inclined to be successful. So thanks again. I wish you good luck.